HelloFresh takes the guesswork and the extra hassle out of planning and preparing delicious meals for dinner. America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh gives you over 40 recipes to choose from each week. And then your farm-fresh, pre-portioned seasonal ingredients arrive at your doorstep with simple instructions to help you feel like the master chef of your kitchen. And did you know that HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% less expensive than takeout? HelloFresh has been an awesome addition to our household's dinner routine. We all get involved and cook together, following the pictured step-by-step instructions. It's a fun quality time and the meals are delicious. Give it a try and see for yourself. Go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, to get 50% off plus free shipping, go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall.
Uy, qué bueno está este podcast, pero como que ya hace hambre y se antojan unos faps de McDonald's. Ve por un McTrío McPollo. ¿O McTocino? Elige el McTrío McPollo con papas medianas y refresco con refill por solo 99 pesos. O el McTrío McTocino, que también cuesta solo 99 pesos y también trae papas medianas y refresco con refill. O mejor pide los dos. Elige tu fab por solo 99 pesos. Corre por el tuyo McDonald's. Y ahora sí, sigue disfrutando del episodio.
Welcome to the Having It All podcast, the show about what it takes to live an abundant, loving life. My name is Matthew Bivens, and each week I'm helping you get out of your head so that you can truly have it all. Let's do it. Hello, everyone. Matthew Bivens here, and welcome to another episode of the Having It All podcast. I'm psyched to be chatting with you today, and this episode we're going to jump into was inspired by a TED Talk that I watched earlier in the week from Tim Ferriss. Now, Tim Ferriss, if you don't know who he is an entrepreneur, he's an author, he's a podcaster. He's got one of the most successful and popular podcasts out right now. It's called The Tim Ferriss Show. And I first was introduced to him, or who he was. I haven't actually personally met him, not yet, but I was first introduced to what he does through kind of the self-experiments he was doing to see how he could improve his effectiveness and work and productivity and happiness and health. If you Google him, you'll see that he's called the human guinea pig because he does a lot of these things on himself and then he shares and talks about them. So anyway, check him out if you don't know who he is. And this TED Talk that I listened and watched on him recently was called Why You Should Define Your Fears Instead of Your Goals. Now, if you've been a listener to this podcast for any period of time, you can probably understand why I would be interested in this. It's because fear and the choice between love and fear is really a theme that's at the heart of this show and really has been something that has opened me up, exposed me to really who I am. And what I mean by that is over the number of, 4, 5, 6 years, I have tried as often as I can to step into my fears, to face my fears, and to ultimately choose love over choosing fear. Because I spent so many years of my life choosing fear. I spent so many years of my life being afraid, shying away from the spotlight, stepping down from the ledge when there was an opportunity for me to jump into something exciting and new. All of that stuff scared the crap out of me. Whether it was new friendships, new relationships, new business opportunities, whatever, it scared the crap out of me. So I spent many, many years choosing fear and succumbing to fear. And it wasn't until relatively recently, like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, when I made a very, very conscious decision to choose love. And ever since then, I've been experiencing the domino effect from that choice. From, having a circumstance in front of me that scared the crap out of me, having a situation being presented to me where it was just the thought of it was making me insanely uncomfortable, just a huge amount of anxiety, an overwhelming feeling of anxiety, and stepping into it anyway. So that is at the heart of this show, and is at the heart of a lot of the things that I share with you. So when I saw this TED Talk from Tim Ferriss talking about defining fears instead of goals, I was very, very interested. I'm like, okay, Tim Ferriss is a guy who, is all about creating and going after those things you want in life and experiencing life to the fullest. So let me see what he's talking about in terms of goals and fears. Now, I really enjoyed his TED Talk. It's short, like most TED Talks are. It's only like 13 minutes. And I'm going to put a link to it in the show notes for this episode over at firesidenetwork.com. So I recommend you go check it out. And really, the whole TED Talk is Tim sharing, he shares this recipe that he has. He calls it a recipe for avoiding self-destruction and self-paralysis. That's the big thing. It's a recipe for avoiding self-paralysis. And really, we can look at it as, you are going to be, in life, you're going to be presented with choices. You're going to be presented with things that are going to, stir up those fear emotions in you. And a lot of times, it's just thinking about that choice, just thinking about taking that step, thinking about approaching that person, thinking about taking that job, thinking about whatever it is, in your imagination, your thoughts about it, the fear just magnifies. And simply thinking about those things make it seem much bigger and much scarier than it actually is. And that's what creates that paralysis, that self-paralysis.
HelloFresh takes the guesswork and the extra hassle out of planning and preparing delicious meals for dinner. America's #1 meal kit, HelloFresh gives you over 40 recipes to choose from each week. And then your farm-fresh, pre-portioned seasonal ingredients arrive at your doorstep with simple instructions to help you feel like the master chef of your kitchen. And did you know that HelloFresh is cheaper than grocery shopping and 25% less expensive than takeout? HelloFresh has been an awesome addition to our household's dinner routine. We all get involved and cook together, following the pictured step-by-step instructions. It's a fun quality time, and the meals are delicious. Give it a try and see for yourself. Go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall for 50% off plus free shipping. Again, to get 50% off plus free shipping, go to HelloFresh.com/50havingitall and use code 50havingitall.
Uy, qué bueno está este podcast, pero como que ya hace hambre y se antojan unos faps de McDonald's. Ve por un McTrío McPollo. ¿O McTocino? Elige el McTrío McPollo con papas medianas y refresco con refill por solo 99 pesos. O el McTrío McTocino, que también cuesta solo 99 pesos y también trae papas medianas y refresco con refill. O mejor pide los dos. Elige tu fab por solo 99 pesos. Corre por el tuyo a McDonald's. Y ahora sí, sigue disfrutando del episodio.
So what Tim shares in the TED Talk, and what I'm actually going to break down here, is this exercise that he calls fear setting. So instead of goal setting, he does fear setting. I imagine, Tim is setting goals for himself and his life and his business as well. But this practice, this fear setting practice, I get it now why doing it is beneficial. And I think we've all probably have heard of something similar, or maybe you've done it, where basically you're weighing the pros and cons of stepping into or weighing the pros and cons of facing your fear. And that's the basis of what the fear setting exercise is. And so I'm going to go into that now. And there's, he says 3 pages to this fear setting exercise. And I'm going to back up because I want to set the context for when you might use this, when you might want to actually carry out this exercise. And it's when you're faced with a big decision in your life that you are afraid of. When you are, you have an opportunity, something is presented to you, and it's creating that anxiety. It's making your hands sweaty. It's making you sweat under your armpits. It's bringing that heat, that prickly heat throughout your body. That's when you can use an exercise like this to really just take a very close look at what you're actually afraid of and weigh the cost and the benefits of stepping into that fear. And so an example that I'm going to share is one that still to this day brings up some anxiety for me, and that's networking events. I have, it's funny, I consider myself a people person. My wife, Sarah, she always talks about how I strike up conversations with strangers all the time, whether it's at the grocery store or at the park or, I'm at the mechanic. I just have this ability and to just talk to people and relate to people and have great conversations with people and it's very weird for me that when it comes to like a networking event, the thought of going to a place, a building, a restaurant, a conference center where I don't know anybody and stepping in there and needing to kind of insert myself into a conversation and everybody's there. It's funny because everybody's there to meet one another, but just that thought, it totally creates anxiety within me and still to this day makes me uncomfortable. Like I would much rather not go to networking events than to actually attend them. So I was invited to go to a networking event around podcasting. And once again, all of those fears and feelings come up. And the first thing that happens with me is I justify and I create a dozen reasons why I'm not going. I'm like, oh, it doesn't work with my schedule, or oh, that's when I put my baby girl down for bed, so no, I can't do that, or it's evening time, and that's like when I like to spend time with my wife, and oh, it's on the other end of town, and there's traffic during the day during that time, and damn, those business cards of mine, they're not, the website's wrong on them, so it's like all these things that just go on in my head. It's just my ego. It's just my ego buying into that fear and creating all these reasons why I'm not going to go to the networking event. So that's what was happening. And so now I'm going to take that example and we're going to plug it into this fear setting exercise. So the first thing that you do in this fear setting exercise is you actually define the fear. So you answer the question, what if I blank? So in this case, I'm going to say, what if I went to this networking event? And so for you, insert whatever it is, the fear that you're having, insert it in that blank. What if I quit my job? What if I came out to my parents? What if I had that really raw conversation with my spouse? Whatever it is, that's what the fear is. You define it there. The next thing that you do, Tim calls it define. And you're defining all of the worst things that you can imagine happening if you actually take that step, right? So for me, my fear is, what if I went to the networking event where I knew nobody, okay? So some of the worst things that I can imagine happening are, I must endure that awkward feeling of walking up to a group of strangers who are already in a conversation and introducing myself and inserting myself into the conversation. Like, that is terrible. I might also have to endure standing alone in the corner by myself, pretending to be busy on my cell phone because I'm too afraid to engage with anyone. And another, terrible thing that could happen is that I get into a conversation with somebody who turns out to be smarter than me, more experienced than me, more clever than me, more personable, and they expose me for a fraud. Like that, in my mind, are like the worst case scenarios of going to a networking event. So we defined what the fear is, or we've stated what the fear is. We've defined what the worst things that we can imagine happening. The next thing we do is you list what you can do to prevent those worst things from happening. Like, what can we do to prevent them or to decrease the likelihood of them actually happening? So for me, if feeling awkward and introducing myself to a group of strangers is one of the worst things that could possibly happen, then a way for me to prevent that could be I bring a friend with me, or I ask Sarah to come with me. So now I'm not doing it solo, walking up to a group. I'm walking up with somebody else. So I seem less, I seem less dorky, or whatever the story is I'm telling myself about being a solo person walking up to a group. Another example is, if I'm standing in the corner by myself, pretending to be busy on my phone, one way I could prevent that is don't bring your phone. Leave my phone in the car. That way I kind of force myself to get into these conversations with folks because I have no plan B. I don't have that phone to lean on as a crutch. So we've stated what the fear is, we've defined the worst case scenario, and we've listed some things that we can do to prevent those worst case scenarios. Next, what you want to do is repair. You want to list things that you can do to repair, if the worst case scenario happened, like how can you repair it? How can you repair the damage? And so we'll go back to my example. Feeling awkward introducing myself to a group of strangers. One thing that I could do to prepare is I could come with a really corny joke, like a corny icebreaker joke, that if I step in, I can boom, lay on the really corny joke, get a few laughs, and kind of ease the tension a little bit. Also, with me standing in the corner by myself, pretending to be on the cell phone, to prepare, I could arrive early and grab a spot at one of the central tables that is basically going to guarantee that other people are going to be crowding around me and I'm going to have people to talk to. So that's what's cool about this exercise, and this is just the first part. But with this first part, what you've done is you've declared this is the thing that I'm super afraid of. And then you've gone on to just think about, okay, worst case scenario, what's going to happen if I take the step? Okay, man, that'll happen, yeah, that'll happen. Then, that's going to suck. And then you're going to go on and say, okay, I could prevent it. So that's kind of interesting. I could do a few things to actually prevent that worst case scenario. And then if the worst case scenario did happen, I can actually repair some of the damage. So what you've done in this very first step of the 3-step process is you've kind of shown yourself that even your worst fears, even your worst case scenarios, A, they aren't that bad. B, there's things you can do to prevent them. And then C, you can actually repair it if it does happen. So that kind of relieves some of that tension a little bit. At least it definitely does for me. So that's page 1 of Tim Ferriss's fear setting exercise. So page 2 or part 2, you answer this question. What might be the benefits of an attempt or a partial success? So if you just attempt that thing that you're considering, if you attempt that thing that you're afraid of, what's going to happen? Are you going to build confidence? Are you going to learn new skills? Are you going to meet new people? Whatever. List out the things that are going to happen. So for me, with this networking example, if I were to go to this networking event, some of the things that could happen from just a partial success is I land new business. I know for me, when I am able to meet people face to face who are experiencing the challenge or the need that I can come and solve for them, that typically will result in me ending up working with them. So one of the benefits of me going is that I get new business, I get new clients. Another benefit is that I can meet people who I could potentially partner with in the future. Maybe I meet somebody who is a digital marketer and they look at me as somebody who can, they can send some of their clients to when their clients need help with a podcast. So now we have a partnership going on. I send my people to them for digital marketing. They send their people to me for podcasting. Boom, win-win partnership right there. Another potential benefit for me is that I can make new friends. And I can talk shop with people who are interested in the same things that I am. If I'm going to a podcasting event, those people are probably interested in podcasting, so we can have some common, some things that we share in common. So that's what you do on page 2. It's simple. You just define or list out the different benefits of an attempt or a partial success. And on page 3, what you want to do is write out the cost of not taking action. Because there's always a cost for sitting on the sidelines. There's a cost for succumbing to your fears. There's a cost for playing small. And so in this exercise, you simply list out, what am I giving up if I don't do anything? So for me, like I said, going to the event, I land new business. That means not going to the event, I'm losing out on revenue. And I'm losing out on revenue, not just now, but 6 months down the road, a year down the road. That could be a significant amount of revenue for my business. I'm also losing out on potential business opportunities, potential partnerships, potential referrals, all sorts of different things that could come from just meeting one of the right people at this event. And I think probably most important is that for me, not taking action, I missed out on the character building that happens each and every time I step into my fears. Because now that I know that for myself, I know that when I step into my fear, no matter how big the fear is, no matter how scared I am, I always come out on the other end stronger, more resilient, more humble, more powerful. All of that happens as a result of me stepping into my fears. So knowing that and choosing to not step into the fear, choosing to to not take action, to play small anyway, like that to me ends up being a big character hit. So that's what you do on page 3. Now, by the time you've done all of this, by the time you've, really looked at what your fear is, defined the worst case scenario, listed out the things you could do to prevent it, listed out the things you could do to repair the worst case scenario, listed out all the benefits, and listed out all the costs of not taking action, most people are going to be able to look at all of that and say, wow, okay, my fear is, if we were to quantify it, the fear now that I've actually put it on paper is like a 3 out of 10. And the upside to taking action and stepping into that fear is like a 9 out of 10. So how could you not do it? And that's what I think is the real power in an exercise like this. Because I believe that each of us can conjure up examples in our own lives of the costs and benefits of stepping into fears. Or at least you can conjure up examples of that feeling when you chose to take action versus when you chose inaction. I know what it's like, and I remember the feeling every time I chose to not take action. For me, I always felt like a chump. I felt weak, I felt small, I felt terrible. I felt terrible. And I don't want to feel that way anymore. And that's what I told myself 5 years ago. I don't want to feel this way anymore. And back then I didn't do an exercise as thorough as this, but I absolutely did some cost payoff analysis in my mind. Like, wow, okay, what am I going to do if, like, what would happen if I do this? And for me, it was quitting my job. That was a huge fear I had at the time. I was not happy with my workplace. I didn't vibe with the management. I didn't vibe with the management style, and I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I remember coming home, sitting on my floor, so frustrated. Sarah was on the bed, and I was just venting, letting it all out. And this thought just popped in my mind, and it was, what would you do if you weren't afraid? I remember it like yesterday. What would you do if you weren't afraid? And so I thought to myself, if I wasn't afraid, I would leave this job, I would start my own marketing agency, and I would go out tomorrow and begin the process of acquiring some of my own clients. And then the next thought was like, okay, what would happen if I did that? Right? And then I started thinking, okay, well, I'm not going to have money coming in for a little while. I don't know how to operate my own business. I've never done it. I don't know where the heck I'm going to go to get clients. I've never done that. And you start thinking of all the different things. But then, boy, I started thinking about all the benefits. I started thinking about waking up on Mondays and being excited. Oh my gosh, I'm actually excited for the week. Because I totally felt that's those Sunday blues. Like when Sunday evening rolled around, I was burning up inside because I knew I was going to have to go into the office the next day. And for me, it didn't work. So I know what it's like to do this exercise. I know what it's like to step into those big fears. I also know what it's like to not take any action at all. And if there's anything that I can share from my example, from my experience, it's that I have always, always, always experienced the benefits of stepping into the fear far outweighed any of the costs, far outweighed any of the things that could potentially go wrong, the worst case scenarios. And I haven't been proven wrong personally yet. And for me, that means I'm going to continue to step into my fears. I'm going to continue to look at them feel my heart race, feel the sweat in my armpits, hear those voices, that inner voice, that inner monologue that's giving me 1,000 reasons why I shouldn't do it, or it's actually not smart for me to do it, or if you were a man, you wouldn't do this. All of that stuff. And I know I'm going to, it's going to come up in the future when I'm presented with an opportunity to step into my fear. But that's been my MO for the past number of years. Step into fears. Every time I step into a fear, I believe I'm choosing love. I'm choosing to love myself, choosing to love others. I'm respecting the opportunity that's being presented to me, the growth opportunity, the healing opportunity. And so I was inspired by obvious reasons by this TED Talk, and definitely wanted to share it with you all because, if you're like me, sometimes you just crave a process. Sometimes you just crave steps, like someone tell me what to do. Give me the 1, 2, 3 steps. And I think Tim Ferriss has done that quite nicely with his TED Talk and his fear setting exercise. So go check it out. Remember, the TED Talk is called Why You Should Define Your Fears Instead of Your Goals. Drop that into Google or just go to TED.com and search Tim Ferriss, TimFerriss, and it will come up. And I'd love to hear some of if you have an exercise or if you have a little go-to mental practice, whatever you do to kind of prepare yourself when you are presented with an opportunity to step into a fear. I'd love to hear it. I can resonate with Tim's examples, and I know that Tim's exercise, and I know there are other exercises out there that you use, and so I'd love to hear them. You can share them with me, or you can also share with me that big fear that you've got right now, and we can work on the exercise together. That'll be cool. I'm happy to do that because I get it. I've been there. That fear is real. That paralysis, that freaking paralysis that happens when you're so afraid by something is real. And there's a quote that Tim Ferriss shares in the TED Talk, and the quote is from Seneca, and the quote goes, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." And it's those thoughts, it's our imagination that just runs wild when we plant some fear seeds. And so this is a great exercise you can use to not let those fear seeds take root, to prevent that self-paralysis, to help you see why choosing love is going to benefit you every single time, and to ultimately help you to move. Because that's what it's about. It's about moving. It's about taking action. So reach out. My personal email address is mattcbivens@gmail.com, mattcbivens@gmail.com. I would love to hear from you. And once again, the link for this episode will be on the show notes over at firesidenetwork.com. This podcast, the Having It All podcast, is part of the Fireside Network, which is run by my great friend Bill Ramsey. I appreciate him and everything he's done to help me get this show off the ground, and we love being a part of Fireside Network, and that's where you can find all of the show notes for every single episode over there, firesidenetwork.com, and you can just search for the Having It All podcast. And I got nothing left for you, so with that, my name is Matthew Bivens, and here is to you having it all.